off the screen real fast. Hello there, everybody. This is Heather. I'm excited this week. This is the last of the series of the CEO Master Panel from Leadership Heart community. And I'm just super excited to have them. And I'm going to introduce them one at a time, and then I'm going to tell you why I have them on here. But in the meantime, thank you for joining this, because I'm excited, and I may be doing more of this kind of series going on. Okay, so first we have Garry Ridge. He is the CEO of WD-40 Company. Hello there, Garry.
Hey, g'day.
And then we have Chuck Runyon. He is the CEO of Anytime Fitness, or actually a Self-Esteem brand, and many other brands underneath that logo. So welcome, Chuck.
Thank you, Heather.
And then we've got Peter Melby, and he is the CEO of Greystone Technology here in Colorado. All three of them are part of the Leadership with Heart communities. They've been on the podcast, and they will be, some of their interviews will be highlighted inside this next book I have. It'll be coming out next year. And so I wanted to bring them on here. This is the third in the series. So if you've been following that, you know that I'm trying to bring on the leaders so we can talk about kind of the challenging times that we have right now. So, you know, that's the big one. And the reason why I chose the people that I did for all of these is obviously they lead with heart, but they have something really meaningful that maybe they said to me that makes me think of. I mean, I brought them on and I had them lined up before everything kind of blew up with George Floyd. And now it's that layer on top of COVID and all the impacts to their businesses. I just wanted to bring them out to talk. And then I want you to, if you're out there, I want you to be out there. Tell me who you are and put that in the comments in the chat. And then, you know, maybe even why you're joining. And then as we go along, if there are questions, please do pose those in the comments. And I might even ask questions to you while we're there, and then we'll just have some interaction that way. So I'd be curious to know, and you can, whoever's here, go first, whoever wants to. What challenges, what are the things right now that what have been the most pressing things that we know it's these issues that are here, but what have you had to face in these last few months, and how has it changed your thinking as a leader?
You know, I'll go first. We are a collection of small business owners. So we have 4 franchise brands here, and people often forget that when you see a big nationwide brand, it's really a small business owner that is operating that business. And so, you know, the last 10 weeks, we have been working 7 days a week around the clock to help small business owners around the world navigate the challenges associated with COVID-19. And there's never been a more difficult time to be a small business owner in this environment, from, of course, you know, dealing with your debt and your landlord and your employee issues, and then, you know, the PPP plan, and, you know, figuring out how to like keep your business afloat. And, you know, it's a patchwork of legislation that is constantly changing as well. And so, you know, our company is going to be fine. We have to navigate it too, like our parent company. But at the end of the day, we spend our time really worried about our small business owners, and we will be now for quite some time. You know, this is going to have a lingering impact. So we are working with them every day to renegotiate their ramp their business back up. You know, do the right thing for their community and the right thing for their business. And it's a challenge for us, and something that we serve selflessly, our franchisee network.
Yeah, I've heard a lot about fitness. I mean, everything just shut down. And so boom,
Yes.
like what happens? And I'm curious to know, have you had any impacts or conversations with the franchisee owners on just the stuff that's happening in the racial unrest? Is that impacting anything? Have you had conversations on any of that?
Very much so. Look, I'm here in our home base of Minneapolis, St. Paul, right? We are where this all began, and this is a global issue. I hope it is it sparks change for the long term. I really do. We are doing what we can internally first, listening, looking at ways we can improve as a company, looking at ways we can improve with our franchise owners around the world. I think this can be a bottom up, starts at the community, and then we're contributing to rebuild our communities and repair our communities here in Minnesota. So we have been deeply shook and affected here, and everyone has globally, but Minnesota, it is very personal, and we're doing whatever we can internally and externally to help be part of the solution, and let's make sure this lasts.
Yes, it's interesting. The listening part, like I said, it stood out to me thinking about our interview the first time we did some months ago, and as I'm peeling back and looking at all these transcripts from all the interviews I've done and figuring out what's going to go inside the book, the most important nuggets for each for people to learn, and this idea of listening. And sometimes it's not listening well, realize you didn't listen well, and going back to start listening more effectively. Right, that's part of your story, and it's that journey that sometimes rocky for all of us as leaders. And so I appreciate that you're continuing along on that listening journey, right? What about you, Gary? Or Peter, whoever wants to go next?
Gary, go for it.
Thanks. Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, as far as COVID-19 is concerned, this is to me, it's a bit like a scene out of the Indiana Jones movie where this ball is chasing you around the world. It started for us on January 17 in China because we have a operation in China, and that's where it broke out. We formed a issue response leadership team that meets weekly. Earlier on, it was meeting more than weekly. And in the initial stages, we set ourselves three very clear objectives. Number one was the safety and well-being of our tribe was most important. Heather, you know how much we treasure our tribe, how important it is. And they are the biggest asset in our organization. The second one was taking care of our customers and our vendor partners who help us serve our customers. And the third one was making sure we maintained our business infrastructure so when we came through this, we can thrive again. And it was kind of like a reset. We went from survive to reset, and now we're looking at thrive into the future. So it's been an amazing journey watching it develop all around the world. One thing that became clear to me in times of great need, and in great need, we can pivot around fear, because there was a lot of fear out there. And I know personally, I've become confident at using tools that allow us to do things like this that I was probably a little afraid of before. So I think there's a lot of learning in the business side of this. We'll read the history and see how that feels a little later. But interesting leading a global company in these very interesting times. We're using leadership muscles we never thought we'd need to use, and some that I never thought I had. So, be present, be mindful, be real. Don't try to control things out of your control. Have a clear strategy. Communicate. These are the important things that are important to us right now.
Well, it's interesting that you say that too, Gary, because that's what's important to you all the time. It's kind of like the conversation I said about Chuck. It's like this was before COVID. We talked about this idea of listening, and when you fail to listen well, and then you realize it, and you then start having kind of a listening strategy that's ongoing to make sure that you don't lose sight of what's happening with your people. And so, what I always say is, I think right now the thing we did before, if we did it well, the thing we did before, we're doing more of it, and we may be adding some elements. And if we didn't do it well, now we're going up. We better do it well, and so let's start doing that thing now. Peter, what about you?
It's funny. The word that comes to mind when I think about the past 2.5 months is what I've experienced is humility. And I don't say that just to be humble. I think that I've never felt more out of my depth as a CEO. And I feel like by nature, the CEO's job is either to have the answer, find the answer, or make up the answer. And in this case, we're going through things. We're all tired of hearing people say, unprecedented times and all of that. But I think the deeper realization of that is that experience only takes you so far, because we're seeing things that are very different than we've ever seen before. And so I know that that one of the most important tactics for me has been to embrace the fact that I don't know, and admit to my team, it doesn't mean that I'm not confident that we're going to be leaders in figuring out how to get through this, but I can't BS people that, in terms of helping them think that I have the answers. And I think that was true of COVID. And, like Chuck said, going through all the different processes of PPP and navigating, we worked in IT, which we became very, very wanted for, especially in March, where everybody needed to shift their systems. But we had a very strong sense that we're doing a lot of work for people who might not ever be able to pay us. And so it was a very different dynamic, as a leader. And then, Heather, you and I talked about this earlier this week, but with the racial unrest, by nature, I don't have the position or the footing to stand up and say, this is what needs to be done. And, as Garry and Chuck both said, learning to listen. It's one thing to say that we have to learn to listen. It's another thing to be put into a position where our survival depends on it. Because I think if we're honest with ourselves, CEOs, we have to listen if we're going to to continually get better at our jobs. But we're also pretty comfortable talking and deciding and just saying this is where we need to go. So it's been weird to feel like I need to stop and not talk as much at a time when people are looking to me more than ever. So that balance has been tricky for sure.
Peter, if I can add to what you said too, it's, there's this fallacy around leaders being all knowing. I'm always reminding our leaders that it's okay to say, I don't know, but the key is let's go find out together. It's what you do after not knowing that determines, right, how successful you'll be. So
yeah, well, I think one of the things that I've heard from our team over and over is how confident they feel in our communication because we were transparent. And I was nervous about it, and it definitely, factored into the trust that we've already built factored into that. But it was amazing to see how much people crave reality in situations where they're afraid. They're afraid personally, and I struggle even with for our Black employees, reaching out to them last week and asking, how things were and, engaging. That was so uncomfortable for me because I didn't want to be the one to single them out. I didn't want to be the one to say you're different. But it was amazing to me when I realized that I needed and learned that I needed to do that, the responses that I got and how real it was when they said, oh, this is what's going on for me. And I would have never understood that at all. And they would have never felt supported in it.
Interesting. Yeah. So because that level, I think this is a real critical point that you bring up. And I definitely want to hear from the other two is, this idea of the vulnerability, because I remember Chuck in our discussion, there was an issue where you were presenting on a stage, you didn't actually fully inform a group and then ended up kind of getting you a little hot water and you realized that, but there are a few other conversations I think about, and, it's saying like, I don't have the answers and I'm actually clueless right now. I mean, I'm going to lead you where we need to go, but I'm going to need your help a whole bunch right now. And then stopping as a white man and saying, I'm going to go reach out to all of my Black employees and just see how they're doing. And I'm sure they probably were not expecting it. It's not something you normally would see. And you're right. There's a scariness of like, well, why am I singled out? But then there's also this idea of being alone. And so they didn't feel alone when you reached out to them and kind of just asked how they were doing. And again, going with like how are you? And I don't know any other way to help but to ask you that. And if you can just tell me if there's something else you need from, then I'll be there. Kind of like just blank slate.
Yeah.
That's a lot. That takes a lot.
One of the things I think I shared with you, Heather, when we talked way back is, the three most important words I ever learned, and I learned them 20 some years ago, are I don't know. And I'm really grateful I'm consciously incompetent and probably wrong and roughly right at most things because, we need each other right now. And, one of the biggest things that it's big in our company is our values. And our first and most important value is we value doing the right thing. And the right thing means, respect everyone, stand up for what's right, and value everyone in every walk of life. And I think by living these values, we are demonstrating how people can and should treat each other. And it sounds so simple. I wish it was. I don't have all the answers. I wish I did. And for those people that are feeling anger, fear, grief, sadness, and outrage, you're not alone. You're not alone. I know many of the people out there are are feeling that, and our personal decisions are our own, but we all share in this situation. So, empathy right now is really important. I often say that, empathy should eat ego. Ego should not eat empathy. And that's really important right now. We got to recognize that our employees are on their own heroic journey, and they'll come back to work changed people. So that's empathy and appreciation and respect is so important now. So it's tough, it is really tough, and it's okay not to know, but it's not okay not to listen, and it's not okay not to care.
Well, and I also think problems are such a wonderful opportunity for team development. So as an example, with this inequality issue that we are facing, I thought our company did better than most, but we examined ourselves and said, look, we can do better. But instead of me leading the initiative, we asked for some employees to volunteer to form and lead a new employee diversity council. And so we had more than enough volunteers. They are now leading the charge. I'm getting like an email a day on this new committee and what we're going to do. And they're going through all the different opportunities, all the different priorities, and they're going to come up with a plan on how we can be even better in the future and how we can contribute to the community. So as a leader, that is a wonderful opportunity to engage your team and let the team develop and become better. And so, I love providing opportunities and problems for our team to figure out.
Absolutely.
I think that's great. I'm curious to know how each of you just feel, individually in your shoes. Really, I mean, it's interesting. Like I said earlier before I came in, it's not lost on me that most people right now are interviewing African American people to get their voices, and I'm standing here as a biracial, presenting African American woman speaking to 3 white male CEOs, right? And so, how do you, because I've been having lots of friends who've been reaching out to me that are white, that are like, they're asking me how I'm doing, but they're really having a hard time with how to talk about it, hard time with the feelings they're having, maybe some around guilt, around just like helplessness. Like, what do I do? What can I do? Anger, as you talked about, Garry, over all of this, and just not understanding, like, where are these people coming from? And so they're trying to enter a battle that they weren't really responsible for creating, some of the people that are reaching out to me. And I'm thankful that they're having that, kind of like you talked about, Peter. I'm thankful that they're entering into it and they're being really courageous and brave to start those conversations. But I'm curious to know just where you stand in your shoes, as folks that are leading organizations, and some, at least one case publicly traded. I can't remember if Self-Esteem brand is publicly traded too, but yeah, so 2 private and 1 public. And where are you standing right now? What do you feel like?
Inadequate, sensitive, and again, I believe that our company, because of its values, is one that respects the situation, but we're not done yet. I like, Chuck said, we're committed to continual improvement, and we're not done by any stretch of the imagination. And this is another way of making that real to us. So, what happened is unacceptable. However, we need now to take this as a time of reflection and make sure that, I ask myself this question every day. Did I do my best today to live up to what I really believe in? Did I do my best today to live up to what I really believe in? And, the Dalai Lama said, our purpose in life is to make people happy. If we can't make them happy, at least don't hurt them. And there's a lot of hurt out there right now. Mm-hmm. So as leaders, we can do whatever we can to stop that hurt in the best way we can, wherever it is in the world. And I'm not taking anything away from what's happening here. It's terrible. Absolutely. It makes me sick. It really does. So, I feel like, how can I do enough, and what can I do? And it's been one of the things that's really, really bothered me a lot, sincerely bothered me a lot. I don't like it. I don't like it at all.
Well, and you have, how many countries? I forgot.
Well, we sell in 176, but we've got operations in 14 different countries. We're in China and Germany and France, whether it was the yellow coat parade in France, whether it's the stuff that's going on in Hong Kong, whether it's what's happening in China, geez.
I was going to say, for years, we've offered emotional intelligence training at our company with our employees. We try to radiate this out to as many franchise owners as possible. And what that means is we can have these courageous, candid, vulnerable conversations. And so in our office, like we ask people to sit down, put your phones down, and we say, do we have permission to be vulnerable without judgment? And that's how we begin the conversation. And then we just listen and share and express. And it really works when you look at another person and say, do we have permission to be vulnerable without judgment? And we just have those courageous conversations. So I really think there's never been a better time to have conversations with as many people as possible that are courageous and vulnerable and without judgment, and just try to understand where they're coming from and how we can understand them better.
I think it's interesting that, and I agree with that so much. I think that intention is key. And this isn't the first time that this has happened. I mean, this happened in Ferguson. It's happened many, many times since, where something has come out in the news. And I have asked myself the question of, well, what's different this time? And I like the fact that it continues to be a topic that we have to ruminate on, we have to understand, we have to speak on, and find some shred of a voice somewhere, and not just be silent. But I think that one of the most uncomfortable things that we do as humans is to change our mind about something. And I think right now, I know that a lot of people's perspectives are being changed, and they're being changed because people tend to follow trends, and they follow what's comfortable and what's real inside their own ecosystem. And I say that of myself too. I mean, the confirmation bias is extremely powerful. And I think that right now, as the tide is turning and people are looking at this and saying, oh, wait, we do have to look at something. It is time to wake up and start to understand this. You have I think the lack of emotional, or the emotional discomfort right now in this country, I feel like is higher than it was during COVID, when at least we were all in this, we were all experiencing the same thing. We were all, on lockdown together. Someone asked me pretty early on in that, I said, is this the hardest experience you've ever had to manage through as a CEO, being the lockdown, in the first 2 to 3 weeks? And it's like, no, it's not even close. It's a problem. And I'm not looking forward to it, but by nature, CEOs, we thrive on challenges to solve. And COVID was a challenge, to solve. The racial stuff is not a challenge that we solve, as CEOs. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what I've recognized, is that my own discomfort actually mirrors a lot of what's happening around me, and in giving space for that discomfort is also not something that I'm naturally good at. If someone's uncomfortable, I'm going to solve the problem, and so it's just a lot of, learning for a relatively impatient person to exercise patience, in different ways.
Mm. That's rich. Anything? What about you, Chuck? I mean, you're keeping it together. You had some adversity in your past. Your brother, you're just, you go up and down in the peaks and the valleys. But I'm just curious to know what you're feeling like. I mean, because I know you may feel maybe a little less in control, because of there's franchisees everywhere and so much to manage in their emotions. But I'm just curious to know where you're standing right now.
Yeah, I mean, like Garry, we operate in 40 countries. We have nearly 5,000 global units on all 7 continents. And if you were to ask me a few months ago if there'd ever be a situation where we'd shut down a global network, I would have said no. And so here we are, right? In 6 weeks, we shut down nearly 5,000 global units. And, we had to, of course, worry about our consumers, worry about our franchise owners, and then, of course, worry about our employees. And, we had the hardest day of my career is when we had to lay off and do some wage reductions, first time ever in the 20 years of our company. We've always had promotions and opportunities and growth. And, for the first time ever, we had to do that. So that was probably the darkest day. I think the last 2 weeks has been very, very difficult for anyone around the world, but it's hit Minnesota very, very hard. And to a certain degree, the COVID thing, on one hand, there's been like adrenaline for that 8 weeks. It's like you are, just nonstop trying to solve problems, and you have to be selfless. And to a certain degree as a leader, I just can't afford to have a bad day. I've got to have the right mindset. I've got to be positive. I've got to look for the opportunities. I've got to be strong for our network. I've got to set the tone with our team. And I can do that if I, as long as I get my physical activity in, as long as I understand where my gratitude is, and as long as I have the right team around me. I mean, nothing has been more important than values right now as our team is coming to play. So I'll say this, the silver lining is, in my 30 years of being self-employed and 30 years of being with teams, I've never seen a team respond better than over the last 10 or 12 weeks. And I couldn't be any prouder of them. It makes me a bit emotional. And so I'll take the silver linings. And, we got a lot to be grateful for.
Yeah, it's one of those times when, I'm so grateful that we have such a high employee engagement at our company. We have 93% employee engagement, and those companies that have 70% of their people who are disengaged, those people are deeply disengaged right now. And I would not know what it would be like to try and engage them and put them in a comfort place, a place where they felt safe. Because if they're not feeling safe, things are not going to turn out well. So again, it's those areas of really caring for our people. As I've said often, leadership is not about being in charge. It's about taking care of the people in your charge. And right now we have to do that. And we're not the sharpest knife in the drawer ever. But I like Chuck, I'm so grateful that I have such a wonderful tribe. And I wouldn't want to sail any boat through a rough sea with a different group of tribe mates than the ones that we have right now.
I think that's a sentiment that I share too, and I've heard it a lot too. That this is a time for people to step up, and they have. Yes. And I love see. I saw it gives me so much confidence, and unlike Chuck, and I can't imagine being in that position where you have to just shut everything down and it goes to zero, overnight. And that probably would have been the most challenging thing that I've ever experienced. But I think that recognizing that people do, I think by nature, we want a challenge to overcome. Some of us take the lead in it and some of us want direction in how to do it. But I've gained a lot of hope for humanity over the past 10 weeks. That I feel like maybe before that, and business owners and managers that I talk to, and there, I do a whole talk called Boss or Babysitter, for people who, and really sharing my path in my career of learning how, to not be miserable, in just telling people what to do all the time, and still, and find ways to trust and find that natural balance, so that's been one thing that I think we have an incredible opportunity to build on moving forward, is the resilience that we see in people who maybe just needed to wake up a little bit, including myself.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. You can't have resilience unless you have adversity. That's the thing. You don't even need resilience unless you have adversity. Like, they have to go hand in hand. So it's like someone who says, I want to build my resilience, I'd say, well, what kind of adversity have you had? What kind of adversity have you had? What do you plan on having? Because you get more resilience muscle the more adversity you get. And it's just so.
I heard you talk about that one time.
Well, Heather, are we allowed to ask you a question?
Yes, you can.
How are you doing through all this?
I'm doing all right. I think I'm doing all right. Part of it is I keep really busy. I have conversations like this a lot that are super inspiring. I have a lot of friends of all different shades that reach out, and then I have very deep relationships with that support system is in place, which I'm super grateful for. If I didn't have that support system, maybe it wouldn't be going over as well. Also, like I always tell people, that with everybody, even the three of you, you don't share the same homogenous experience. You don't see the exact same experiences. You don't have the exact same lens. And I don't either share the lens of what everybody looks like me that has as well. And so because of that different lens, my different backstory, I see things differently. My mind was trained differently, right? And so while, for example, the first couple of weeks, I'm not going to lie to you, and people see me as like the most uplifting, like strong kind of person. And the first couple of weeks of COVID, I was broken down. I was like, all my business went away. And I just all of a sudden started eating, and I was like, I don't listen to this, Chuck, but yeah, eating a lot of bad stuff and drinking wine every night. And I'm like, what is going on here? Like, I was just broken down. And then I said to myself, okay, you got to stop this. Like, this is, you are not going to be the problem. You're going to be the solution to your problem, not the problem of the problem. Right. And so I made myself back out of that and in my thinking first. That then, of course, from the thinking, the behaviors changed. And now I feel like I'm in a lot better place despite all the stuff that's been happening. I continue to try to show up as my best self because I feel like if I lead by example, others can do the same. And that's all we can ask for, is that for us, for you, as leaders, for me, as a leader in my own right, that I just continue to show up the best I can. And yes, I'll have those down times. And yes, I have to have that half a glass of wine, or yes, I need to have those chocolate, whatever that is. And it's whatever, I work out in the mornings. It's like trying to have my own self-care is a priority because that's the only way I can show up the way I do. So thanks for asking that.
I have a question
and I just try to be supportive. I feel like I'm supporting my white friends. I'm not sure. I am. I mean, I'm supporting them more. They come to me, but I'm going to them because I sense the guilt and I sense the struggle. There's so much internal struggle, and there's just so much going on in this thing that, the sentiment that you shared, Garry, on just inadequacy. Like that part is like, oh my gosh, what role have I played? Oh no. Have I done this? Oh shoot. Where have I fallen short? Like that's what's happening with them. And I'm trying to work with them, and I'm trying to help them through that process of realizing that we all have a role to play. All of us. And we all have to get better.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that became clear too, and I've said it before, that, people have, and this is more around COVID, is people can deal with risk because they can identify risk and they can decide whether they're going to accept it, gift it to someone else, do something with it. But uncertainty is really, really hard. And I heard something the other day that I thought was valuable. Someone described uncertainty as a series of future events that may or may not happen. And when I start to think about uncertainty in that lens, it's future events that may or may not happen. It helps me internalize how would we lead through that. How would, this may happen or it may not happen. So, you've kind of got to plan for the worst and hope for the best. But this uncertainty thing is very, very disruptive in people's thinking.
Mm-hmm. It's, I have a question for all of you, all three of you. What advantages have you seen? What have you gotten done during this time that you, that had been on your list, or that it was just, that you didn't get to before?
A lot of stuff. I said to someone the other day, I don't think I ever did any work when I was in the office because I have been so busy. We've been virtual for 13 weeks now. And, the sun never sets as it doesn't set on Chuck's business, because somewhere around the world, every minute of the day, someone in our tribe is doing something. So, I think one thing that's become clear, we've become better virtual leaders. And one of the things that was really scary was, could we be as engaging virtually as we are in person? And I don't think that virtual leadership will ever, or should it ever, replace one-on-one leadership, because we're social animals. But what I think is going to be fabulous is, I think the interval between personal interaction is now going to be enriched, because we're going to be better virtual leaders than ever before. So that was a big aha for me, a big learning for me.
Mm.
Yeah, I think for us, like most companies, our business is entrenched in a bricks and mortar experience, and has been for, the industry has been entrenched in it for 40 years. So we've been able to accelerate all of our digital coaching services, all of our nutrition support. We've been able to get into the homes and into the mobile phones of our consumers at a much faster pace. So this has accelerated our digital efforts. And I'll kind of echo what Garry said. We have a wonderful campus here, and we have a great environment and a top-notch culture. And to a certain degree, some of our leaders used to look at remote workers sometimes as a second-class citizen, like they just weren't as good, like they're always distracted. And now every one of our leaders has more empathy and understands the effectiveness sometimes of the work-from-home environment. So we will never go back to being the same. We will now always have a hybrid that is work from anywhere. and of course, the corporate office. And I think that's the right approach.
Mm, I love it.
I love it when I look at the screen and I call it the Brady Bunch, because everybody's a little square like the Brady Bunch on the screen. And what's become clear to me is everybody has an equal size space now, which is really, no one's really dominating, and you can actually mute someone if you want to, which is really interesting.
Oh yeah. I love that. Yeah, well, you can do that before it's like, I got to keep listening. I got to keep listening. Let's see. Jim put something up here on the screen. So I grew up in a white minority, and I'm married to a paraplegic. As a certified emotional intelligence practitioner, I see all the time. I see all the need to be better in creating a safe community. How are you making your efforts to truly all about, basically, we all must do better? So is there something that you're doing to kind of amplify that message? That is my message. It's always my message. I want to, before we answer that, so think about that question, and then I'm going to answer your question, Peter, which is, what did I get done during this time? And it is the book, and that was submitted to my publisher. So yay. And then I have to come back to it and kind of reshift it and improve it and stuff, right? So that was a very big thing that, by the way, if I was doing all the stuff that got canceled before COVID, I don't know how I would have gotten it done. So that was a very positive thing, and lots of reinvention happening on my end. So as it sounds like it's happening over there too. So, all right. So back to Jim's question, basically just really, how are you doing to amplify the message that we all must do better, maybe inside your workplace?
I want to touch on something that Garry said about everybody having equal space, in the box when we're on the screen. And I think that's, I'm going to use that for sure, but evening out voices, and making, it's something that I've known, but haven't always practiced in all aspects, of what I do, is recognizing that often, the loudest people tend to get the most airtime, and the most extroverted, the most comfortable in a group. But it doesn't mean that they have the best ideas. It doesn't mean that they have the best thoughts, and especially people who have come through different circumstances and may not be as comfortable, with their foundation, or as confident, in their ability to speak up, often are drowned out. And I think that right now, at my company, I mean, we need more action. We need more, things to just tactically do, to improve, our diversity, improve our awareness, all of those things. But for me, it's starting with making sure I'm listening to all the voices, not just the ones who are speaking. And it's kind of a cop out to say, that at this point I'm just listening. But I think that those close conversations are what helped me to not jump straight to thinking that I have the answer, or that I've, just putting a plan in place and checking the box. So that's something that's a lot easier said than done, but trying to find balance in voices.
That's rich.
I agree with what Peter said there, in that, I read a great book once by Al Rees, Focus, Your Future Depends on It. And this is a time to be deliberate in your thinking. This is not the time to say, oh, this is what I'm going to do tomorrow. I mean, you got to listen, you've got to absorb, reflect, because you want to be meaningful in the next step. So that's kind of my reflection right now.
I love that. Yeah, that is true. It's easy right now to be short-sighted, so I get that.
Yeah, we are constantly reminding our team that when we're in a meeting, there are no titles or no tenure, and we want people to express their point of view and their ideas. We create that safe environment where they can do that. And one of my favorite compliments people will say is, I can just show up authentically, my full self. And we have to recognize that and reward that and talk about it. And people just feel safe to express their ideas or points of view. And that's where, a great disagreement or good ideas, that's where, we make everything a little bit better, is in that room together.
So true.
Here's a question here. I'm thinking we need to do some seriously meaningful D&I training, but it all feels trite. Any ideas? I'll mention something here that I've had people reach out to me on kind of starting to help them with conversations on this topic. I don't think that it's trite, because here's my philosophy about change. There's no better time to start than today. So don't look back on what you didn't do before, but focus on how you can be and show up as the best leader and organization right now. So, part of when you lay that out and if you start doing that training, is to say, we know we've been devoid in this area. We know it hasn't been on our radar and has been a focus. Okay. And we're admitting that we have been like that. And so what we'd like to do is move forward with a clean slate, including all the voices, as we just talked about, and moving the organization forward so that we can be better in this area. So a while back, I was working in an organization and they brought in a D&I consultant. And one of the things she said that stuck with me, it's still to this day. And she said, diversity is about being invited to the party, and inclusion is about being asked to dance. And that's something to begin considering in your organizations, as you get to choose who's asked to dance. So you get to choose who's asked to the party, but you get to choose who's asked to dance. And I just had a conversation with someone just recently about this, because we were talking about the organizations that I work for, or the ones that I can speak to. And I said, well, it's been harder for me to get into the super big brands. And I think it's an accessibility issue. I haven't really thought about it, to be honest. And I'm not a victim. That's just not who I am. But when she brought it up for me, I thought, well, why? I don't know why that is. I've kind of wondered that. And it's an accessibility issue. So it's that I was invited to dance. Yes, I'm on this platform. I mean, I was invited on the dance, but I wasn't invited to dance yet. So just keep that in mind when you're, for you, Sarah, who's also part of this community, just love her. When you are thinking about and making those decisions in your organizations, and looking around the table, and not to be trite, not to be kind of cliche, not to be like, I'm only picking you for this and this and that. Obviously, you have to look at the entire picture when we're talking about all of this, right? And once you know that, I was telling my two boys, I have 4 children, 3 of them future Black men. And I tell them, if you have to represent yourself this way, you have to walk this way, you have to talk this way, you have to educate you this way, you have to do this. Because if you take 2 people next to each other, you may or may not be selected, but you have to go over and above, because maybe you will be. And so there's just the people that are in those shoes in your workplaces are used to having to have those conversations with their parents or their children. And if you stand in their shoes in that regard, then you realize, wow, they're looking for opportunities too. And so you can help them shine in this regard. So it's a new initiative. We're starting new today. And you get to help that, just like what Choka said. You get to do it, and you get to run it. And I think you mentioned the word edit. That might be a word you use, Chuck. But I'm here to just help you if we need to kind of course correct. Other than that, it is yours to own. So that's what I would recommend, Sarah, and for anybody who's kind of considering that. Let's see, there's someone else.
Now, my question is, we've been doing D&I training and education for some time. The question I'm asking is, how effective is it? So that's something that we'll be, is it really delivering what we want it to deliver? Again, I agree with you. It's not about checking the box. Like, we've done it. No. Is it delivering?
I love that, because what you talked about earlier, I think it was about changing minds, and there are certain people's minds we are never going to change. And by the way, they work in your organization too, right? We are just never going to change some of their minds or their behaviors. Now, you can change, you can adjust that or enforce it by saying, well, you're not in line with our values, with our focus, and so you've got to go. That's a way to kind of enforce it. Or we're going to write you up because you did this, whatever, right? Those are the kind of ways we do that from a performance perspective. But there's certain people you're just never going to change. So I commit to changing the things I can and influencing those I can. And those are the ones I talked to someone earlier, and it was like, okay, I have a question. Is your leadership team on, in this too? Yes, they are. Okay, great. So there's a awareness that's there, and there's a desire to change. Okay, I am so in it with you. Like right now, I'm smitten with you. We're going to have some fun. If you don't have an awareness and a desire to change, right, then it's irrelevant. It's not going to happen. And that's kind of the key, is to ask yourself that about your organization. Is there self-awareness, and there's a desire to change?
So true. And, people can adopt something, but whether it's embedded is a different thing.
Yes. And how are you recruiting to it? How are you recruiting people in that have that embeddedness? Because some of it you can kind of change, but again, a lot of it, it's in there from their childhood.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are going to look for an outside agency to come in. I know it's one of the things our diversity council is looking at. And then, like, to answer your question, Gary, we're trying to do some benchmarking. How do we benchmark, and what does great look like? And so we can, see the other side of this.
And when we benchmark, what is different at the organizations that seem to be performing better than we are? What's the difference? What are they? I think one of the questions we ask in our employee opinion survey that we've been doing for 20 years is, I respect my coach. And 97% of our people in the organization say they respect their coach, and their coach is their boss. We don't have managers. Everybody's called a coach. And we changed the word to respect because we thought that was a more meaningful word than, what other word may be there. So it's that sort of thing, what questions are you asking that will give you the meaningful answer?
I love that. And the tracking the performance portion of it is critical. Yeah. It's a discussions that's happening all over. Corporations are standing up, they're waking up, and change is, I think, going to happen. And you're right. What is going to be the impact, and what is it going to be long lasting? Are we changing lives? Are we changing cultures in and even in the homes that the employees walk to after we've done the training? So, I appreciate all this discussion. This has been wonderful. I know most of you have to go on to yet another appointment, but I want to just have you end with maybe, if there's either for organizations, other leaders who are, in this place, and I know that you are all three more emotionally intelligent than most. That's why we're having this conversation. What might be a direction or some word of hope or something you might leave those with that are just kind of sitting in this place because you're in a similar place? What would you give them? Whoever wants to go first, you can say it.
We can make a difference. I think business today has the biggest opportunity to influence lives. We say, imagine a place where you go to work every day, you make a contribution to something bigger than yourself, you learn something new, you're protected and set free by a set of values, and you go home happy, because happy people create happy families create a happy community, and a happy community creates a happy world. So, there is no comfort in the change zone and no change in the comfort zone. And we're certainly not in the comfort zone right now. So now's the time more than ever for us to lead, which is a really interesting word.
Yeah, and I'll echo kind of something Gary said earlier in the conversation about employee engagement, ranking very high. And I think there's a direct correlation between engagement and how significant they feel, like how their work impacts people outside the network. And there's never been a better time to weave in purpose into the workplace. I mean, we have some big problems to solve globally. And what a better time to engage your workforce, help them understand their significance, and they know now what they do on a Tuesday, how it shows up somewhere in the world and makes the world a better place. So leaders, what a better time to rally your company around a purpose that's greater than what shows up in the bottom line.
Love it.
I think it's easy for leaders to get discouraged about people, because people's situations are hard and people are hard. And one of the things that I get encouraged about is it's very easy to look at human nature and humanity and see the negative sides. Even just in our employees, the parts that are very self-serving and seem to be only focused on what can I get for myself. But I think that, for most of us that have been working on culture for a while, we recognize that there's something that unites people too. Everybody wants to take a risk, but have a safety net. Everybody wants to dare to achieve, and succeed. And everybody wants to do better. I mean, everybody wants to be a better tomorrow than they were today. They want to advance. And those are all things that companies want to. And so there is the ability to create alignment, around a lot of that stuff. And I've learned just that even some of my most the employees that seem to not, to be so defensive and so, projecting the idea that they know exactly what they're doing, they don't need any input, they don't want any input, are oftentimes the most insecure and the most unsure of themselves. And just by asking, simple questions of, what are you working to improve? What are you working to get better at? How do we do this together can create a very different kind of alignment. And I think that, and that's something that I've found a lot of refuge in during this time is, like all of you said, asking the right questions, asking questions that actually put us, in a place where we're getting real answers and not just BS. And that's where my hope, and my trust in my team really comes from is, look at it and say, oh, you know what you need to be doing better. Let's create a plan for this together. I don't just need to tell you that every day. So I think this is as good of a time as any to recognize, that alignment can bring a lot of results and a lot of engagement, and to what Garry said, a lot of happiness. So, thanks for having us. This has been great.
I appreciate all of you, and thank you just for fighting the good fight. Trying to lead with heart, leading with care, while still keeping your businesses afloat. I know it's a tough time, but I appreciate you taking this time with us. And this will be going; it'll be recorded on the YouTube channel, and so I'll send out the link to you. But then anybody who wants to go see it, if you couldn't watch the whole thing or you want to send it to everybody else, I'll provide that link later on to make sure you can do that. But this has been great. And just remember, in this space of D&I, that we want to make sure we're inviting more people to dance. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Heather. Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Garry.
Thank you.